Hope
Not
you can
yet,
see
not
me.
yet.
Ah. Hello, everyone. Hope you can see me, and welcome to today's Kedro Coffee Chat. We're thrilled to have you join us as a part of our amazing Kedro community. And as you know, these sessions are all about staying connected, sharing knowledge, and learning together. And we are so excited to have Elijah today, who is going to present on technical UX design in Kedro. Elijah will guide us through the key principles of the UX design tailored for technical workflows in Kedro, and giving us a practical insights and inspiration. You can also see our Kedro Coffee Chat wiki page, which you can find in our repo. It describes the short rules of those coffee chats and the upcoming topics. So please visit it to learn what we are going to share with you in future. And the rules are quite simple. We are usually recording our sessions, but today that's the first time we are streaming this live on YouTube. So welcome to our viewers tuning in here. And at the end of the session, we'll give you time to ask questions, because the main purpose of this session is to stay connected with our audience. And let's dive in and enjoy the session. So I hand over to Elijah, who is going to present for the next 20 minutes.
All right, thank you, Elena. Let me share my screen. Am I sharing my screen?
Yep.
All right, so hello everyone, my name is Elijah, and like Elena mentioned, I'm a technical designer here in Kedro. And I'm sure that most of you are familiar with Kedro, but long story short, it is an open source Python framework that incorporates the software engineering best practice to help to build a production-ready data science code. So in today's coffee chat, I'm going to share with you our journey here in Kedro. How do we conduct a technical UX design research? Specifically, Kedro is a very technical product. And we'll also explain, how this process can help to foster a cross-functional collaboration between our product managers, engineers, and designers. And hope this is something that you guys can take away and can also share your experience with us as well. So before this year, 2024, in 2023 and before, research within Kedro was primarily conducted by designers. And a lot of time, we use our expertise in user research, but we not necessarily involve, the engineers in the process. But through this year, this is something that we have been trying to involve the engineers from the beginning of the research phase, so that this can also help us to understand the root cause of the problems and promote the whole team to be a bit more user-centric development. So like this meme that everyone is familiar with, like the lady in the red dress, we'll share with you how shifting from the user research conducted solely by the designers to a collaborative approach which involved both the designers and engineers. And I will use our two recent research features, both the deployment and the data catalog research as an example. Sorry, let me share this one. All right, so here, basically, I will walk you through that our technical UX research process, which is structured into 4 key stages: collect, understand, synthesize, and develop. So first of all, we start by collecting the ideas. So usually through the backlog validation and team discussions, so that to ensure that the alignment within the team on the user needs and the priorities. So in this phase, usually our PM and the tech leads are responsible for refining the group backlog to ensure that the validation opportunities are scoped and prioritized in line with the category directions, stages, or the session level strategy. And the team then move on discussing the trends and the signals that we observed as to understand Kedro's current technical architecture regarding the respective topics. Next, we have understand the problem, which includes defining the goals, objectives, hypothesis. And in this stage, we also gather the insights through the surveys, defining and refining the user groups, conducting the interviews, and forming a comprehensive analysis and understanding of the user pain points. And moving on to the synthesis stage, here we analyze and mainly using tools of Dovetail. In this case, the interviews insights are being tagged in according to the categories and also clustering the theme and mapping the user journey. And this helps us to distill some of the key insights and identify some of the opportunities for improvements. And finally, we have the development phase. And we prioritize the actions here using the impact and effort matrix, and also other relevant decision tree, which help us to make the priority. And these are then translated into actionable items on GitHub issues, which can be useful for our team engineers for their implementation. So basically, you can see through this whole process, it is a collaborative approach involving both the product manager, leads, both from the technical and the design perspective, and also the relevant research engineers and the designers. So let me try to, going through to each of the phase. As you can see over here, it's the collecting ideas. So like I mentioned previously, usually before we start even the research, for example, here in the deployment, we notice some of the GitHub backlog issues. So for example, on the left-hand side, you see one of our contributors mentioning about the possibilities of deploying Kedro and to integrate, with the other MLOps platform. So released in 2017, but during that time, the MLOps wasn't that much. And after all this progress, we the market and the industry has matured a lot. So there is a possibility and an opportunity for us as a Kedro team to investigate, to integrate into the deployment, so that to make us, stand out and as an even more unique product. And once that signals, has been observed, we want to make sure that the team has been aligned in understanding what is happening in the outer world and how Kedro can capture that opportunity. And hence we also set up a team workshop to discuss what our current deployment architecture and what our understanding and what are some of the ideas and the opportunities and goals that we would like to set forward. So that here, basically, you can see that moving on to the understanding the problem, we have actually one of the first phase of approaching the research. Our Kedro deployment research, for example, has involved around 10 user interviews across 3 different user groups to capture diverse perspectives and the deployment needs. And alongside the interviews, we also received 40 survey responses to enrich our understanding of the user experience. And the reason why we conduct the user survey response is to help us to have a first-hand and a first gateway, of understanding what are some of the preliminary context of people using Kedro for deployment, and what are some of the platforms that they use, what are some of the initial pain points. So these really helps us to scout the right users for us to interview with, and to refine the user groups, which I will elaborate a little bit further later on, because we know that interview can be quite time consuming. So we want to make sure that we focus on the right user group, but at the same time, best use of the time. So that is why having the survey can help us to refine the user groups and then conduct a quality interviews and then deep dive into that user workflow. So basically this process took around 3 weeks and help us to deep dive into the workflows, the insights, and identify some of the areas for improvement. And for example, like, in the deployment example, basically we can take a look of the demographics and the tool preference, of our Kedro users. Starting from the user roles, we can see that nearly half of our users, 47.5%, they are data scientists. Machine learning engineers make up the next largest group, following by the data engineers, which is around 20%. And the remaining 10%, it falls into other categories, which include roles like architects, platform engineers, and MLOps specialists. And to the tools they use, we can see that Databricks and Docker are the two most popular platforms for the deployment. Following that, we have Google Cloud SageMakers, which serve the users focused on the cloud-based deployment. And then we also have Argo, Azure Data Factory, and Kubeflow, which also featured, but they are less commonly used. And from this research, both the survey and the interviews, we have found out that 60% of our users, they rely on the CI/CD automation, for deployment. And I'm not going to go through into too much details, of this values, that users defined in the deployments. But long story short, the positive, feedback we've taken from the users is there is 95% of successful rates in Kedro deployment, which include their experience in using Kedro, specifically the slicing pipelines, the pipeline registry, the Databricks API for the efficient code and organization and execution, and also the data catalog, our custom data set, and also the integration tools like the DBX enhancement. So it helps to structure and make the ecosystem more flexible. And then finally, we also have simplified data access and pipeline clarity through our data catalogs, pipeline executions, and also it helps the data scientist to understand the pipeline functionality. So like I mentioned previously, the survey, I think one of the benefits of using a survey is to help us to streamline down into the main user groups, because we understand that deployments can be very complicated. A lot of people, they have different opinions, and the cloud platforms that they deploy can be very diverse. So how do we make sure that we can select the right user groups, but also ensure that we can also capture a diverse of opinions? So one thing that we have observed, from the survey of this deployment is after we've collected back, we notice a lot of people that are using Databricks for the deployment alongside the other platforms. But after the discussions and the PS within the team, we noticed that we don't want this research to divert into focusing on the pain points and the user journey of Databricks. We want to focus on how people, they do deployment in Kedro. So that is why it motivates us to separate the Kedro users using Databricks for deployment from the other platform users, which you can see in the second group. And then we also want to avoid, that survivorship bias. So that is why we try to also recruit, some of the people who don't use Kedro, for deployment, and we would love to understand, why they're not using that and what are some of the challenges that they experience. So here is actually a high-level, overview of that unified deployment journey across different user groups. As you can see that the Databricks users, the other plugin users, the non-Kedro users, they both develop their Kedro project locally, and they set up and test their Kedro projects in a local environment. Next, we have storing the code, and the team here, they use GitHub to ensure the consistency among the environment. And moving on to automate the CI/CD packaging, GitHub Actions automates the package as a Docker image and the wheel file, preparing our users for the deployment. And then moving on, we have what we call the conversion of the Kedro code into or the Kedro nodes into the Databricks or other cloud platform components. And here, one thing that we have observed is they rely on the Databricks asset bundles and Terraform to streamline their deployment from GitHub to Databricks. And the VS Code Databricks extension also help to synchronize their local code with Databricks without requiring any CI/CD update. So next, we have assigning the clusters in Databricks and the cloud platforms. And the users here, they allocate the resource for distributing the computing, choosing between the isolated and shared clusters. And then next on, we also have containerizations, where the users, they create the Docker images through the necessary dependencies. And also moving on to running jobs on both cloud platforms and also on Databricks. And online inference is something that we also observed. And finally, we have monitor and iterate, which the users, they monitor the logs, troubleshoot the errors, and resync the changes through the CI/CD if necessary. So usually in this phase, of synthesizing, like I mentioned previously, we have got a lot of separate interviews that across 10 different users. And using the dovetail, we do the tagging. And by tagging is already the theme that we have observed, from the interviews. And using the tagging, we actually categorize those snippets of their conversations into the emerging themes. And those emerging themes can help us to formulate this unified deployment journey. And usually the way how I do that is for each users, I also create a separate user journeys and putting 3 to 5 interview user journeys of one specific groups, and then notice what are the common trends, what are the common patterns, and we put them together, and then finally collating all those 3 user groups, user journeys into this unified one, which you see right at the moment. Yes, so undeniably, like I said, deployment can have a lot of diverse, opinions, but nevertheless, it's important, for us as a team during the research phase to boil down the insights into few, because this will also move on to the opportunities and directions. And here you can see that from the deployment interviews, we see that there are a few insights. First one is the plugins, which we notice that the users, they rely on Kedro connection plugins for the third-party platform. They often face outdated or compatibility issues, making that conversion of Kedro nodes to the platform components challenging. And the next on, we have a node grouping. Here, user, they values merging the multiple nodes into a single tasks on the deployment platform. But the current plugins provides a limited functionality in this aspect. And like I said, Databricks is a common platform used by our Kedro users. So here we see that Kedro users, they actually deploy on Databricks in 2 different ways. One is actually longer methods, which generates a real file on the Databricks file system. And another one is a quicker method, which help to make the project code more directly accessible in the repo of the Databricks, so that there is also an options with running it on the Databricks notebook. And then moving on to the online inference, which is one of the less prioritized, insight compared to the first 3. But here we also see that there is also an increasing emerging trends, for the users to deploy the online inference pipelines, such as the course using LLM for real-time predictions in an isolated environment. And finally, there is a container and the dependency management issues that we often see that users, they deploy with Docker image, but for a larger projects, using a single container for the entire project can be quite inefficient. So usually, after the research, of the insight, we also have directions, and the opportunities. And in terms of the direction and the opportunities, we go on to some of the brainstorming sections to notice what are some of the actionable insights that we can take on hand, and then we divide those into different actionable cards. And here you see that in one of the research, the data catalog, we prioritize our insights actions into both the engineering effort and the user impact effort, so that we can prioritize which of the focus that we can focus based on this matrix. And from there on, we also release the research summary, including the key insight through the GitHub. And the benefit of this is to engage with the open source community's discussions, because usually after we have got the insight, we will share with the technical committee, but at the same time is beneficial to have the open source communities to keep that conversation flowing. And on the right-hand side, you see that those actionable tickets that you have seen before is being categorized into GitHub tickets, so that you can see the team within us, we can prioritize in terms of categories, and we can keep monitor which tickets has been accomplished or not. And this can also be further prioritized into backlog grooming or the sprint planning for the future. So yeah, so that's a very high level technical design approach that we do here in Kedro. But I would love to hear some of the feedback and some of the thoughts from you guys. And notice that this is not a hard rule that everyone has to follow, but this is just our current way here in Kedro of conducting a technical user research, and the process will be evolved in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elijah, for reminding us how do we start from the very initial issues, and how then we create the work streams and split them and categorize the actual issues found by our users and pain points we identified during the research. Amazing work. And now is the time for the questions. So feel free to leave them in the chat for YouTube.
Yes.
We'll be happy to read them and then answer. Thank you. Elijah was asking how can we see the questions, and here is the answer. Basically, thank you, Meryl, for asking the question. And Meryl asked, "What's the next for deployment now?"
Yes. So thank you, Meryl. So basically, like we mentioned previously, there are 5 key insights that we have taken from the research, and the top 2 is the plugins and the node grouping issues. So right at the moment, our deployment, we are focusing on the plugins. So what are some of the available plugins that Kedro is supporting? And so we are going to investigate what is the best supporting model to make these plugins more maintainable and more sustainable for the future. And this includes our alignment with the third-party plugin developers, for example, the get indaters, and also discussions within the team, how much effort that we as a Kedro team would love to support and gain control of those plugins. And the second one that I mentioned previously is the node grouping, which is very highly related to the plugins, But like we said, these functions, right at the moment, we're trying to investigate what are various methods, of node grouping. Is it by namespace? Is it by tagging? Or other kind of like, functionalities? So these are some of the areas that we are looking at. And at the moment, we are moving on in terms of node grouping. We are moving on some prototyping and also prototyping, different ways of grouping the nodes. And we'll share, with the team and the community at a very short future. Feel free to ask more questions.
All right, looks like the presentation was so clear that no one has questions, which is a good sign or bad. We better think in a positive way. Thanks all for joining us. That was the first time we did it via streaming on YouTube. And we hope to keep the same format and maybe bring something new next time. So please follow our updates in the Slack channel, and let's meet together in 2 weeks. Friday. That's already be December, so the Christmas is coming. Thank you all, and have a lovely Friday.
Thank you very much, guys.